What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another very special edition of the Burnout Brighter podcast. My name is Matt, and I'll be your host for this evening's events. This is episode 112. This time, the show is going a little bit off the rails because A, we're recording in person for the first time in quite a while. This week, I'm very excited to be joined by two amazing content creators that we just have a ton of fun talking to. From Yumi and Capri, we have Mr. Sean Capri.
Hi. We're in the same room. This
We
is
are.
amazing.
I know. I can see your face.
I know. Hopefully it sounds fine. Yeah, we won't. We won't.
But
yeah,
we're going to be good
social
about
distance. Yeah.
And my very special lead host on the PlayStation Drive, we have Mr. Ryan Turford.
Hello, friends. Hi. This is so weird. We're in person, and I can actually just wave to you, and you're actually seeing me wave.
I know, right?
That doesn't happen very often.
Ryan and I don't even see each other when we podcast together ever. Like we just kind of do a Zoom call or a Skype call.
Well, it's literally a phone call.
Yeah. I'm just driving around.
Yeah, I know, and that's my favorite thing about you guys is that you just hit the road and you talk.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Yeah.
So before we get any deeper into things, because today we're going to be talking all about horror games, and what if we made our own horror game? But I want to learn a little bit more about Yumi and Capri for the people who might not know who you guys are. So I'm going to throw to Sean first. If I had a ball, I should have brought a ball. Now I regret not bringing a ball.
Oh, that'd be so fun.
Okay, I'm going to imaginary throw a ball.
Yeah.
Sean, if people don't know about Yumi and Capri, tell me about it.
Well, it's a collection of podcasts really that kind of centers around just friendship, honestly. It all started with We the Gamercast, which continues to go on, where I have sweet hangs with strangers from the internet, and it led me to meet just a wonderful group of people. Led to a show called the Xbox Drive that Ryan and I do now, and basically in April we kind of kicked it up a notch and asked the community, like, what do you guys want from us? Like, we're ready to take this up to the next level, and through Patreon support, they kind of pushed us to launch the RPG Cave, which Ryan I'm sure will talk about, the PlayStation Drive, which led us to you, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So it's really just a bunch of content creations, and actually the Nintendo Drive now is also sort of a creation that came out of the community wanting us to do more and more content. So it's amazing how if you just put it out there, that's one of the things and one of the approaches I've had to content creation the whole time is like, I have an idea. Is anybody up for this? And if I get like a sense of appetite for that content, then we fire it up, and it's just been very organic over the last, I guess, 6 months since we launched really the Yumi Capri thing as it is now. It really started thanks to Bobby Pauls, who unfortunately passed away earlier this year, and I had a critical kind of decision to make of what to do after that. Bobby was my partner with the Yumi Capri Patreon, which just goes to show how selfless he always was, because it's my namesake in the Patreon thing, and I always asked him, like, it should be his thing. He was the big get, he was the big draw, and he was such a wonderful friend that he liked the name Yumi Capri. So when he passed away, it was, what are we going to do with this? And the community rallied, and we have been making content ever since, and it's made that quite a bit easier, just to have friends and community and games to talk about. So
and that's what I love a lot about what you guys do, is just their community, especially ever since like I've joined. They've been so welcoming and so kind the entire time. Like, you guys have really fostered a community based around acceptance and kindness, which is so awesome to see. And like, you guys work way too hard, like across all the shows you take care of. Like, Ryan, tell me a little bit about the shows that you handle, because you again are so busy all the time, and you handle all the editing and stuff. Tell me about your side of things.
Well, I don't know if I'm busy. I joke all the time where I have like almost near infinite free time in a lot of ways, where I do have a day job, but for the most part, it's, pretty flexible. I work from home, and then, when I'm not working, I'm just playing games. I don't have anything else going on. So, but yeah, for the most part at Yumi and Capri, I'm the chief content editor or producer, whatever this. Sean gave me a fancy title once.
The title changes all. We're gonna have to get business cards just so that we can look at it and remember what the hell the job titles
Can you order
were.
like 50 individual business cards, all with different titles for Ryan, so that way he can just kind of toss one out depending on the day?
Yeah, I'll just read a random one as I introduce myself. Be like, oh, I'm this and this today.
Yeah.
But essentially, I handle all editing on a lot of the shows, not all of them, because Sean does some of the editing for some of the shows he primarily does, like We the Gamercast, which is hanging out with sweet hangs with strangers from the internet. So Sean mostly does pretty much everything for that. I just handle the YouTube video.
It's a nice ad, yeah.
But for the most part, that's fine. But then a lot of our drives, like the drive, all the drive shows, I edit all three of them. So the PlayStation Drive, the Xbox Drive, the Nintendo Drive. I fully do the RPG Cave and the PlayStation Drive. With Matt, of course, but also the RPG Cave with Garrett, where we talk about RPGs every single week. We break down either a different game or series every single week and have a lot of fun with that. I mean, I've loved RPGs my whole life, and being able to do like an RPG show where I can just, even if it's sometimes where Garrett will not know as much about the game we're talking about and me just giving him a PowerPoint presentation, like sometimes that's so fun for me just talking about games that I'm really passionate about. And you don't get to see that too often.
Yeah.
As we kind of talked about when we first started the show together, because there's a lot of RPG podcasts out there, but a lot of them are like tabletop RPG podcasts and not necessarily just focused on video games. So I thought that was actually a really fun angle. And yeah, so there's that. So I guest host I host 3 of the shows, and then I also edit most of the shows and upload them all to YouTube and stuff. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, if you guys don't know them, make sure you go check them out. If you don't know them and you're not at least listening to the PlayStation Drive, I hate you. I'm there. You should be listening. Assholes, come check it out if you're not. But one of my favorite shows, and especially every time that Ryan brings it up on the PlayStation Drive, it kills me the name. What is it? The Pants Patreon podcast for I can't even get the full name.
Pants Patreon podcast for patrons podcast.
I love it. What the hell is that show?
So first of all, there's a long history of me making stuff, whether it's part of this content stuff or just way back even before I met any of you guys, like of me making just the most ridiculous names for stuff. Like back in 2006, we got a couple video cameras and I hosted a birthday party, which was basically a drinking competition, and we called it the Team Awesome Reality TV Show, aka Sean's Birthday Bash 2006. So it was the longest name ever, and we've immortalized that on DVD. Luckily, it was kind of before the YouTube time because it was just a bunch of us getting hammered in my parents' house. So I have a history of making just things kind of just ridiculous, and the Pants Patreon podcast for patrons podcast is that, because I just knew that I wanted some sort of Capri, like the pants, I wanted some sort of link there, and Bobby, bless his soul, he said yes to it. I'm like, I don't know what else to call this thing, so I just kept adding words, and I like alliteration. And basically it's an exclusive podcast for people who support at the $3 tier and up on Patreon, and they can ask me whatever the hell they want. So we've discovered that I have a distaste for milk, and that seems to be a bit of a theme.
Okay.
And the quick fire questions to very deep, like empowerment questions. We run the gamut. So I usually record it at 1 a.m. on Tuesday morning before work the next day, because that's when I can squeeze it in. Yeah.
I love it. I love the name. Every time Ryan brings it up, it just makes me chuckle, because I'm the same way. Whenever we had some people over from Streamcast, which are a fantastic podcast, but they have like a thing where every week they take on like a moniker for who they are. So obviously I went a little bit too far with it, and I called myself Matt, aka Dionysus, the god of wine, and also Matt's favorite persona character, and I just made it like 30 words long, and then my co-host got really mad at me every time they had to call me that. So I appreciate the long-winded titles.
Mm-hmm.
So guys, if you haven't checked out Yumi and Capri yet, please go do so, because they make amazing, fantastic content. And I mean, yeah, I'm there, I hang out sometimes. But before we get any deeper into the show, whenever we have new guests on, we always like to talk about a game that matters to them, because we like to link back to mental health when we can, and talk about games that are just really important to us for some way, shape, or form. So I'll ask each one of you. Ryan, I'll start with you. Can you tell me about a game that matters to you? A game that got you through a tough time, or a game that you feel is so important and special and deserves to be shouted out? Just a game that really matters to you.
Okay. So for me, there was one that, I could go into one of 2 directions, because I wasn't really expecting this question, but I could go with, honestly, my favorite game of all time, and that's kind of the boring answer, which is Super Metroid, which is a game that made me kind of realize that just how special games were to me in a lot of ways, where I knew, because I grew up, obviously, in the 80s, because I'm an old man, of course, and my mom would always have a habit of showing me movies that I shouldn't be watching when I was 8 years old or 10 years old or whatever. So I was really watching a lot of the Alien films and Terminator and stuff like that growing up. And I remember really my favorite movie at the time was Aliens, and I couldn't believe just how much I loved that film, which of course, again, probably not a film that, person who was, 8 was watching. But I couldn't understand or put into words maybe why I love that film so much, or why I kind of love the atmosphere, the look of the film and everything, and why that really resonated with me. And it really wasn't until I played Super Metroid for the first time where I kind of realized that I love kind of this blend of sci-fi and horror together, the creepy atmosphere, the feeling of dread and loneliness that the game can kind of pull off. And it really made me realize after playing it that the games will always be a constant in my life. Regardless of what I do, regardless of how life changes, I will always play games of some sort, and they'll always have a place in my heart. Whether or not I stick with, current games or not, I will always have a game like that to go back to. So it's always been a very special game to me. It's a game I play, at least twice a year. I play through it because I literally have the entire game memorized at this point because of muscle memory and stuff. So That's definitely a game that's special for me because I mean, for the most part, there isn't really a game I can really point to that got me through a tough time or anything like that. But there are games that I can definitely point to that have like maybe brought up some memories from my life. For example, Life is Strange Episode 3 from the original Life is Strange brought back some memories of when my mom was in a car crash and how we thought we were going to lose her after she broke her neck, and essentially that when Chloe comes out at the kind of the end of that episode, spoilers for Life is Strange Episode 3, it totally brought me back to that moment when I saw her for the first time like that. So it's more stuff like that, but there wasn't really like a game that really got me through a hard time, or if anything, like when I'm usually like depressed or anything like that, a lot of times I actually get to distance myself from games a bit, if that makes any sense, and kind of like, go outside some more, or maybe try a different hobby that's not necessarily games. And that's kind of how I work through that. So.
Well, especially because I feel like games can be used as a positive escape, but at the same time, I feel like it's, at least personally, it's a very slippery slope to be like, or like, I haven't moved in 12 hours. I know I'm not feeling well today, and I know that this is what I'm doing to kind of get around it. So I appreciate the kind of alternate route, but no, and that's the thing. That's why I love asking this question to new guests, is because like I feel like it just gives them a little window into why games are important to them, whether it's a super deep reason or not. So thanks, Ryan. Thanks for telling us about some games that matter to you. Sean, same question. What's a game that matters to you?
Again, with like Ryan, like there's probably a good half dozen or so that really kind of stand out. But the one that's sort of most recent actually is oddly enough is Diablo 3.
Nice.
Not the most emotional experience, I don't think, or really like the story is kind of secondary or even third or fourth to like really what you're there for, which is endless gameplay. And for me, it was actually Ryan and two of our other Canadian friends, Tony Baker and Joel Brooks, earlier this year after Bobby had passed away. Like I don't know that we ever really said, let's play this to like, be there for each other, but that's basically what we were doing. So there was a couple nights there anyways, where we would have some pretty decent sessions, like 3 or 4 hours, which was long for me because I don't always get the chance to play games for that long. So my wife kind of just knew that that's what I needed to do, is just go be with friends. So we hung out and we played Diablo and kind of just rediscovered that game. Like I'd beaten it on my own before. I played actually a couple times just like solo, and rediscovered that game is really meant to be played with friends. The way that they do multiplayer, especially on console on Diablo 3, is just awesome. We jumped on a Discord call and just hung out, and it happened to be Diablo 3, and it really could have been anything. It could have been anything that brought 3-4 people together, and so it was more just the togetherness, I think, than the game itself, because it seems like Diablo 3 means so much. That was the one. It was just everybody had it. It just happened to be, we happened to be available. And there's always like this really tough thing whenever playing multiplayer games. I find this as a challenge, is like everybody has to have the game, and then they have to have the game on the same console, and then they actually have to want to play the game with other people, and they have to have like the same time to like, so many things have to line up for that multiplayer magic to happen, where when we were kids, it was just come on over and you just hang out with the same friend every day. Like at least it was for me, just hanging out with neighbor Matt. It was same time every single day, Star Fox 64, GoldenEye, like those types of things. But yeah, Diablo 3 this year was one of the more memorable ones, even though we've had a great year of gaming. But yeah, that's the one that stands out.
But that's the thing, though, is that like it isn't always about the game. It's about the story around it. Like
Yeah.
Diablo 3 actually has some really warm memories for me as well, because when we were in Korea, I still had my Canadian PlayStation account, and like there wasn't an easy way to buy games because my credit cards would get blocked sometimes because it would be like pinging from South Korea.
Totally.
So like there was one night where I had some friends over and we're like, what do we want to play? Diablo's on sale. We ended up like splitting up into like 3 teams, where like one guy was like making like a bunch of PayPal accounts to try and buy the game through PSN Store. 2 went to the local what's called the local kind of like a Walmart to see if they had it in English. And I was like calling my mom, being like, can you go by the pharmacy real quick and buy me a PlayStation Network card? And then we spent so much time in that game, and as 4 guys who didn't really know each other that well, it was a bonding experience. So that's what I mean. It's these stories are special, at least to me, and I love asking this question because again, it's not always the game, but it's what exists around the game. So I'm sorry for both of your loss, because it sounds like everything that you guys went through is really difficult, but I'm glad that gaming was there in some small way to kind of help you along through, because it's not easy.
Right? Yeah. I mean, Bobby he brought so many people together, so it was kind of circular in that like he brought us all together, and then we were there for each other in his passing. It was like we wouldn't have even known each other if it wasn't for him in a lot of ways. So at least not the larger kind of group and community. So yeah, it was all very fitting for sure.
I'm really glad that happened then. Like, I'm really glad that it came together like that. And again, I'm sorry for your loss, because it's never easy. But let's keep this train rolling a little bit. Let's jump into some what's new. When what's new, we just talk about what have we been playing, what have we been watching, what's been going on. And I feel like we've been up to nothing lately. It's not like we've had a very busy weekend at nothing called Fan Expo. But Ryan, let's go back to you. What's new? What's been going on? What have you been playing?
I mean, for one thing, we're all in person. Which
Yeah!
is pretty awesome. And like, this is really special for me too, because again, Matt, you and I have been doing a podcast. I told you this before for 6 months. Never met in person.
Right?
We met through random Twitter DMs where I was like asking for people to come do the PlayStation Drive with me, and you happened to be the one person that kind of reached out. I mean, to be fair, there was actually a lot of people. You were the one that got picked, and it's so special to actually be able to do a podcast with you in person and get to know you a lot better as well. So it's been really special just to get to hang out and do stuff. As far as what I'm playing, I mean, there's a lot of games out right now, but of course, since we're here on the road and I've got my Switch with me and nothing else, I've been playing Tales of Vesperia Definitive Edition on my Switch. I love that game. I mean, I love the Tales series, as we've talked about many times over on the PlayStation Drive, which you can go hear about on podcast services around the globe. But I love love Tales of Vesperia. I haven't played it in a very long time, and I have it on my Switch, and it runs really great there. So I've been playing that, and more Final Fantasy 14 because I'm getting ready for Final Fantasy 14 in November because I'm very excited about the new expansion. So there's that. But otherwise, I mean, yeah, this weekend's been amazing. But I'm sure Sean's also going to talk about that in just a second too.
Yeah, I'm sure. But like, Ryan, to touch on that before we move on very quickly, you don't understand how excited I was when you messaged back being like, hey, like, if you want to do it, if you're down. I was kind of like, because I remember sending a message out and I was kind of being like, this guy doesn't know who I am. Like I've heard of you guys, and it's kind of like, I got so anxious. And I remember telling my fiance, because that was literally while we were packing up the apartment, like we were getting ready to leave Korea. And then you messaged back and you're like, yeah, let's do it. And I was like, oh my God, he picked me?
Yeah.
So
no, I went in because I did a lot of research. I went and looked at all your stuff. I checked out Burnout Brighter. I looked at some of the quick YouTube channels, videos and stuff that you make, like the news videos and stuff like that. And I thought you'd be a great fit. Like, especially too, because I was a little bit worried at first that our tastes might be too similar at first, which is always like something you don't really want for a podcast. That's why I like the type of dynamic that Sean and I have, where like we don't love all the same games, but we come to a lot of commonalities on a lot of stuff too. So there it's kind of the right balance. So I was looking for that type of co-host, and it wasn't really until I listened to Burnout Brighter where I realized that you and I are actually pretty different.
Yeah,
like we like some of the same games. We definitely love RPGs, but like we're not like the same person, which is definitely kind of the feeling for it. Whereas like, and you were definitely the best person that kind of fit that mold out of the people that wrote in, because I was telling Sean before, but we had like 80 people submit applications to be on the show, but it was a lot of in a lot of cases either we were too different or we were too similar. And I felt like you really struck the right balance from checking out your content. So yeah, and to be honest, it's worked out for the best, I think, because I mean it's been so awesome to podcast with you, Matt. So
likewise, man, I've had so much fun with you, and like even just coming into the community and getting to know everybody, and like. Ryan, I appreciate it every week, and it's like it's such a small thing, but for me, and like this is kind of where like my own little neurotic bits come in, but like I have to be on time, I have to be like there.
About
and it's like
20 minutes ago,
you call me at the same time, and it's like just like, and then we get to jump in and talk about PlayStation for an hour every week, and it's just I love it. I've always wanted to do a PlayStation podcast, and doing it with you, I don't think there is a better way that all this can come together. So thank you for picking me, and it's dope we're sitting in a hotel
I did
room
lose
talking
twice
right
in a
now.
row,
Just,
Sean.
I'm so excited for our future together, But Sean, what about you? What's new? What's been going on?
I'm surprised that Ryan didn't tell you what he was playing most recently, which was NHL 22 in this hotel room. Just a couple of moments ago, Ryan and I faced off twice. Once with Edmonton versus the Calgary Flames, and then we did an all-star game. And well, maybe I know why Ryan didn't bring it up, because what can I say? Destruction. I set records for how many penalties I took. I was
nice.
Tons of hits, tons of trips, tons of interference.
Holy crap!
I don't know how else to get the puck. What can I say? I'm
the same way. I just smack it to people. Yeah.
That was fun, and yeah, we got codes from Xbox Canada, and it's been kind of just. I haven't actually done that in forever. Like sit down in front of the same TV, couch co-op, kind of like NHL kind of experience in forever. So that was super fun. I'm working my way through Far Cry 6, which I'm having a hard time even talking about it because I'm doing it for review, but I'm like, so I'm having a hard time kind of separating how would I feel about this game if I bought it off the shelf, right? And now I have like a game that will last me until next Christmas, because it's gigantic. The map is enormous, and there's tons of things to blow up. Which who doesn't love that,
right?
I love flying around in my wingsuit, and even again playing it next to Ryan, like him and I have totally different styles of how we play this game. And it's totally clear, and I'm not even just like putting it on for to be funny about it. I'm like, this is just how I play the game. I see the waypoint, I'm gonna airdrop into this thing, drop right into the middle of it, and just kind of shoot everything around me. And that's how I play Far Cry. And Ryan puts a silencer on his snipers and takes care of the alarms. And I'm like, well, we'll see how this goes,
Yeah.
And I just try to take care of it as quickly as possible. And that's a romp, man. It's super fun, but it's long, and it's there's lots to do. And so I'm definitely having like a hard time going like, is that what I would actually want, or am I like kind of struggling with just getting through the game for the review? But
right.
For the most part, the mechanics of the game feel good. The shooting feels pretty good. The like driving around this world feels good, and I hate the villain, so that's I think a good thing. But yeah, like there's systems in the game that actually are pretty fundamentally different from previous Far Cry games that I think are getting missed in a lot of the conversation about the game. And I think it's because people just rush through it to review it.
Right.
So there's things that like as I'm kind of playing through it, I wish were better. I wish I was more incentivized to find a different gun or mod a different gun or to kind of change up my gear or something. And it seems like there's almost like a leveling system, almost like a looting system that doesn't quite click for me in the end, that in the way of like a Diablo where I should want to like go clear out this area because by the end my weapons and my gear is going to be that much better. I'm going to feel that much better and cooler. But I've been locked in with pretty much the same loadout for quite a while.
Yeah.
It nudges you in the direction of like change out your ammo in this way to take care of these enemies, but for the most part, like I have explosives, and that like you can't. It pretty much works.
Blow it all up.
So yeah, like there's things that I wish were better. But primarily I wish the conversation around the game was better. Honestly, I just feel like it's been pretty reductionist overall. And Ryan and I have chatted about this quite a bit, just about our approach to reviewing the games that we've been playing. And I've actually kind of enjoyed this, what we're allowing ourselves to do now, which is play the games as we would play them, not rushing for an embargo where we would be like raced to try and put out content that maybe doesn't really reflect how anybody else plays the game, doesn't really reflect us with a fully formed opinion on it. And what we end up with is like talking about the same game, sure, over a couple of weeks on the podcast, but we are sharing our journey with it. So maybe the first couple hours is great, and I had an awesome time with that. But I feel like if we were to just do all the content all at once, I actually forget what it was like in the first couple of hours of the game. Whereas now I'm kind of documenting that as we go along. So
it's tough when you start reviewing games. Like I've run into this over the last year as well, where it's just like sometimes you'll get a game and you have like 36 hours until embargo.
Yeah.
And like especially with like smaller outlets, if you don't hit embargo, it's tough to get views on it, right? Like it's tough to get pushed. So it's like I'll spend time I mean the most recent one that I remember was 12 minutes where we got it, and like the embargo was like the next morning.
Yeah.
So I basically stayed up almost all night, got it done, and I remember like emailing the dev at like 3 a.m. being like, I'm stuck at this point, and he actually replied.
Oh wow.
At like 3 a.m. be like, try this. I was like, oh my god, this guy's up too. But like it kind of changes your relationship with the game in a way that like I just wouldn't really anticipate.
Yeah.
I don't know if Ryan, you feel the same way. Like for me, it's like I rushing it sometimes for me, and I play games quickly regardless, but like rushing it sometimes I feel like you overlook some of the negative aspects of it, but at the same time, something that might be just mediocre might stand out more negative because you're doing it in a kind of condensed time frame. I don't know, Ryan, where are you at with this?
Yeah, you just have to take a game by game approach with it. That's always how I felt about reviews ever since I started writing reviews back in 2016. I mean, that's been kind of my approach the entire time, because I always think of it, because the way I always phrase my reviews or think about my reviews is someone walking up to me, if we both like after the game launches, and ask, hey, should I check this game out? Is it worth buying? And then that my review is kind of the answer to that question. So as a result, I always play the games how I feel I would naturally play it.
Right.
There's been one or two cases last year where I felt I needed to go faster, and Sean knows exactly what I'm talking about with two Ubisoft games at the end of last year.
3.
Well, I don't count Immortals in this bunch, but Watch Dogs and Assassin's Creed specifically were like ones where I felt I needed to get them done, where I kind of went outside my usual mindset. But for the most part, I'm like you, Matt. I actually play games pretty quickly anyways. So a lot of times when we get pretty like reasonable embargoes, I usually naturally have the game done by then anyways.
Right.
For an example, like whenever I do like longer RPGs, a lot of times you usually get them pretty early, like 3 or 4 weeks even, sometimes, depending on the company. And then I find that, 3 or 4 weeks is enough time with that game where I've, finished as much as I need to finish for the review, whether it's beating the game and then some side stuff, and then I don't feel like I'm rushing through it. And at the same time, because we do podcasting primarily, even though we post our podcasts to YouTube and we do video versions of them, for the most part, we know our listenership is like 90% on the podcast side and less on the video side.
Right.
We do the videos because we get the feedback from our patrons that they like the videos, that they go and watch them. And even if we have like 10 to 20 patrons that are asking us to do this, that we know are watching the videos, I'm okay putting the extra effort into for them.
Yeah.
So I don't feel to Sean's point, I don't feel like we need to rush out content for embargo for that reason, because our listenership, we found, hasn't really changed one way or the other, whether we have stuff for embargo or not.
Totally.
So at that point, we may as well, just have it out whenever we feel like we're comfortable with the content going out. And a lot of times, I know recently we did the Tales of Arise review with Matt as well. And we actually got a lot of positive feedback about that, where people really liked that approach we took to it, where we gave it a fair amount of time, where we went over it, our thoughts over 3 or 4 shows, and then did a big conversation about it. Like, people like that. Yeah. So I think that might be the approach we do much more from now on. But I mean, again, if we're in a good situation where if we've beaten the game before the embargo just naturally, then I have no problem getting it out for the embargo.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely changed more in the last couple of years, because I've noticed from when I started doing reviews until now, I've noticed that we get less and less time.
Yeah.
Between
games are coming in hot.
Between when we receive the game and when the embargo happens, which then leads to more questionable situations where we have to rush a little bit. Yeah. But like an example of like when you did the Deathloop review for us, that was a game that you probably would have beaten by the time the embargo would have happened anyways, because even though we didn't have a long lead time on it, it was a short game. Yeah. So yeah, it's a game by game situation. Like, you can't expect to beat, a 70-hour game in 3 days. Yeah. And then have it up for embargo. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
and no one wants that type of review, I think.
Exactly. And like, because I feel like you got a little more like delirious about the game at that point, and like the Tales discussion ended up being fantastic. Like, we talked for like 2.5 hours almost.
Yeah, an hour of spoiler cast and then an hour and a half of just the game without spoilers.
And that's what I mean. Like, I feel like giving us that time, like, it also allows other people to finish the game so that they can jump in on the spoiler cast, kind of ready to go as well. But yeah, I don't know. I love reviewing games, even with the time crunch sometimes. But sometimes it's kind of like, oh man, no, there's no way I'm going to do this, and we just gotta. I like your approach. That's what I'm trying to say. I like the way that you guys handle it, where it's just like, we're going to be honest about what we're doing, and I think that's awesome. I think that's the way to go.
It's one of the things that Bobby and I used to talk about all the time. Is just like, how can we be different? And this is actually kind of purposeful in that way. Like, if everybody else is going to race for day one, then like we're just going to be a little bit different. And what we find is that that's actually just how people play games as well. Like, if we're going to be, we don't really think of ourselves as like an outlet. Like, I definitely don't. Like, it's called Unique Capri, for God's sakes. Like, it's not, I don't know. It's more just like I said, I kind of even described it earlier. It's a collection of podcasts. So yeah, we play the games like our audience does, like our community or our friends do. So yeah, we just kind of talk about it in that way. And if everybody else is trying to have their review on day one, then we can actually be different very easily, because we can just see everybody going over there. We just sidestep a little bit over here.
And go day 0.
Yeah. Day 100.
Or day -1.
Day 145. Yeah, it's still relevant. Cool.
Well, exactly. Like, it goes back to when you were doing on the Xbox side before I joined, when you were talking about Assassin's Creed Odyssey for 6 months, Sean. Yeah. Where you were playing it talking about it every week and basically playing through it for, again, like 6 months.
Yeah, it did come from, I was listening to I listened to way too many podcasts, and there was one that I really looked up to, OK Beast, back when they were doing that, and Blessing, when he was on that show. He's now kind of funny. There was one show that they did, and I was listening to it on the way back. Actually, I think it was actually from a trip from Toronto. And I remember him talking about some game that was like 2 years old and just unapologetic about it. Like, there were some times where I would be on a podcast, I'm like, I know I probably should be playing this, but I'm playing this old game, and I would put disclaimers around it and all these things. And it's like, that's stupid. And there's Blessing, just like, I'm playing this because it's fun. Yeah. And that was a big like light bulb moment for me. So that kind of, and that now kind of like setting our stance on it, especially as we are getting review copies a little bit more consistently now. Like, I kind of want to be consistent with what our expectations are back to the publishers, and if that
Right.
for me, it's all about setting expectations, which is why I spend so much time talking about it. To be honest with you,
Yeah.
And it also helps too that we have an evergreen show in our portfolio with the RPG Cave, where
yeah,
we don't really review games there or talk about current games. We just talk about
right.
RPGs from like
Right.
we'll talk about like Super Nintendo games, or we just did an episode on the PlayStation Vita and like our favorite games, like RPGs from the PlayStation Vita. And so yeah, we have like shows in our toolkit like that, or even We the Gamercast, which is even about games sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's like it. Yeah, we also do shows that aren't even about games, and people still love them anyways. So
Yeah.
we don't even have to go do the same thing everyone else does, I think.
Games are great, guys.
Yeah, man.
As for me, I have been completely sucked into Lost Judgment. I can't stop
Oh,
playing
yeah.
it. Like even now, it's just like I like to play those games in like giant spurts, and it's like this is the shortest one, the shortest feeling one so far, just because like the stories had me so hooked, and I'm like in the second to last chapter,
Yeah.
and it's just like nonstop. I can't stop playing it. It's like every free moment that I have, I'm like, let me jump back over to Yokohama and Kamurocho because it's just the combat is just so satisfying. The story has been fucking awesome so far, and it's just a complete whirlwind of stuff, and I'm having a blast with it. And actually, Friday after we left Fan Expo, I get notoriously motion sick, especially on buses. So what I did this time, and it was, I don't know, I think being at night helped. I kind of stuck my head down, rolled, like, pulled my hat real low, and I loaded up Mythic Quest because I keep hearing about it. And they're like, it's pretty much the best like video game-esque show. And I loaded it up, and it's fantastic.
Nice.
I've watched like 8 or 9 episodes in the last few days just because I'm like, I can't stop. Acting's great, the stories are great, and it actually feels like, sometimes you have shows, especially like tech shows or stuff that's like they kind of paint video games in a certain way. This feels like really true to life and how I imagine, I guess, the game industry to be in a certain way. It's awesome. It's kind of stuck on Apple TV, which I mean, if you don't have, but I mean, if you do have a PS5, you would have gotten 6 months of it. It's a great excuse to jump in and watch Ted Lasso on Mythic Quest, and I've been obsessed with Mythic Quest. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, I can't believe it. I keep hearing about it, and I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to take the plunge, and I can't stop now. So, and it was just renewed for more seasons, so I'm happy about that.
I love it. I haven't checked any. Man, I'm so not into any of the TV. The time I have is for content creation and playing the games for the content creation.
Yeah.
It's a little circular for that.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's a content world.
I know. Yeah.
We'll roll with that.
It's a
I'm just too busy watching anime to watch TV shows. So there you go.
But that's a good excuse.
That is a good excuse.
All right, guys. Well, since it's the week of Halloween, and we're going to be getting a little bit spooky soon, I wanted to talk to you guys about some of our favorite horror games, and we will get into the second part of the discussion a little bit later. But I kind of wanted to open there just to preface. I'm a giant baby. I'm horrible with horror games. I play them very, very selectively. And like for me, I think like I enjoy more like horror elements than outright horror. But before we get into like the specifics, I kind of wanted to touch base about like, where is your level of horror, Ryan? Where are you at with horror games as a genre?
I'm not gonna lie, I love horror games. I actually like, because I have 2 favorite genres across any medium: sci-fi and horror. And when they come together, it's like peanut butter and chocolate right there. Like I love the combination of those 2 in particular. So as we go into kind of the horror games, you will understand kind of that mindset of it. But I don't know, I've just always really loved watching horror movies. It was something that I didn't watch a ton of as a kid, but more as like when I was a teenager and as an adult. Like I love watching like the Friday the 13th movies every year, and like Halloween and Alien and a bunch of other ones. So yeah, I love horror games, but they can be hit or miss. I find that they're more hit and miss out of like almost any other genre that's out there, where like sometimes they're awesome, or sometimes they're alone in the dark on Xbox 360.
Oh,
Like sometimes they're just terrible. So it kind of depends. But I definitely think like horror games have gotten much better. Like the last generation.
Yeah.
I thought we got some really solid horror games. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about those. But yeah, I love horror games. They're awesome.
Dope. Yes, I think for me, like I remember watching Black Christmas in theaters.
Yeah.
And, like a good friend of mine is like obsessed with horror movies. So we went on a couple dates over there with a bunch of us, and I remember in that movie they like cut somebody's skin out and make cookies, and I was like, no, fuck this, I'm never doing this again. I'm done with that. I have no and like my fiance is the same way now. She can't do them.
Yeah.
So like I don't mind horror tinge things, and like for me, like true to life, true crime-esque kind of like that stuff makes me feel really like grossed out, but in a more fun way. But sometimes I'm not horror.
Well, also that Black Christmas remake was just no good either.
Oh, God,
it was just kind of gross. Whereas if you watch the original, it's still great. But that's watching movies from the 70s. So
I'll take your word for it. What about you, Sean? Where are you at with horror games?
horror games, I am a big baby, but for whatever reason, I just want to like dip in and see what's around the corner, what's happening over there. I don't know that I'm quite as storied as Ryan in the horror games, but yeah, I it's a weird relationship. I feel like any enjoyment of horror has to be weird, right?
Right.
Because it's built to scare you. It's built to like make you feel uncomfortable. And if you're liking that, and it's like, what kind of kink is going on over here? So it's definitely something to be aware of, I would say. But yeah, it's all about like the right time and place and mood for me. Like, I don't know what it is, but Dead Space, Ryan mentioned like when sci-fi and horror come together, like it's got to be one of the best games, even outside of the genre. It's one of the best games ever made. Like, it's just one of my favorites of all time. But I feel like I have to build up a tolerance to it.
Fair.
And especially because I don't play like horror game after horror game, it'll be once in a blue moon. So I kind of have to like build up the courage a little bit. And I have really good memories of playing, I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but like The Evil Within in a hotel room with my Xbox, and I had to take breaks. Like, I could really only play for 15, maybe 30 minutes or so. And then I'm like, okay, I got around that corner. I killed that boss. I just need to like walk away. Cause I was like, I grip the controller a little tight. I get a little sweaty, but for whatever reason, I'm enjoying it. And also just the artistry of it is really great too. So, and there's a lot of surprises. It's meant to surprise you. It's meant to show you something that you weren't expecting. And I think that's what generates the horror response. So just kind of automatically, you're going to get an experience that you weren't expecting, I think, when you jump into something like a horror game.
Yeah, I like, for me as well, like, I'm always like, I look at them and I'm like, I want to do this, but I don't know if I want to do this. Like, I think for me, the last one that I really dove into that's like just straight horror was Resident Evil 7.
Yeah.
And I was playing that in VR. So like and again, like, that was soon, not that long after VR launched. It was like kind of the only really major AAA game that was like, we are 100% in on VR. And like, there's that moment where you go down to the basement for the first time. And like, again, similarly to you, Sean, I had to like, I would be like sitting there with the headset in front of me and like, I'm going to play. I'm going to play.
It's just a game.
I'm going to play.
Real.
I know they're chasing me, but they're not actually here, Matt. It's okay.
Yeah.
And then like the first time we got to that basement, I stood there for probably about 2 minutes, just like trying to hype myself up to go down those stairs. And I just, it's just, I couldn't finish that game because A, I'm not really much for puzzles, but B, like, every time I had to like talk myself into putting it on.
Mm-hmm.
So let's kind of go in that direction then. Like, what are some of our favorite horror games? Because I do appreciate Resident Evil 7 a lot for what it is. It was just too spooky for me. I couldn't do it.
That's only because you tried to go like too extreme with it. Because
Yeah,
if
the
you played it in
VR.
VR, like that's even scary.
Yeah,
That's almost too scary for someone like me.
Yeah.
I mean, I still played it in VR and actually really enjoyed it. But I get motion sick in VR, so
Yeah.
it's one of those things where I probably would have enjoyed it more if I could actually play it in VR properly. But as far as some of my favorite horror games, I've got. I'm probably gonna list it to like keep it to 5 games in particular. Dead Space is one Sean brought up. It's one of my all-time favorite games. In particular, we did an Xbox 360 countdown last year that was done just by me of my favorite games on 360's generation, and that was my second favorite game on that console because I love kind of the mix of sci-fi and horror and the unique approach to the game design too, and how you had to basically sever the enemy's limbs rather than it wasn't just about headshots and stuff like that. So it's just really interesting, like how you go about it too, especially like the weapon selection you have, because you've got like buzzsaws and like lasers and stuff like that, but you're not really using like machine guns or anything like that. So I loved how that game was designed. Resident Evil 2 is one of my all-time favorite games, and as Sean knows, I love the remake in particular. It's definitely one of my favorite games of this generation. But even just the original Resident Evil 2, I love too to this day. Despite the tank controls kind of suck, despite the visuals being pretty dated, I still have like a soft spot in my heart for that game a lot. Until Dawn, another recent game.
Oh yeah,
so good.
Just is a huge callback to all the the 80s and 90s horror films that I love, that I kind of listed off when talking about kind of my history with horror. It's just such a well done job that they did with that game, and I love kind of how you can your choices kind of tailor that experience in a really interesting way. Although I don't love the idea of them having like the motion tracking with the PlayStation controller, because sometimes even if it's flat on a table, it just reads it accidentally and your character gets killed, and you're sad. Especially if you're going for like a no death run or something like that. Silent Hill 2, one of the creepiest games of the PS2 generation, but also a fantastic game on original Xbox. Maybe I'll be talking about that soon on another show. But I love kind of the twists and turns that story really goes on, because more than anything, I think that Silent Hill 2 actually has one of the best narratives of any horror game that's actually ever released. Like I love just where it goes and kind of exploring kind of the character's journey as he goes to Silent Hill, which of course is just spooky on its own. It's also the first Silent Hill game where we had Pyramid Head kind of come in there, so we had like an actual like major villain in a Silent Hill game, like a big man antagonist that kind of like reflects like the true nature of the character that you're playing as in the town. Plus, you've got an ending. Spoilers for Silent Hill 2, but there's a special ending that you can trigger by doing a whole bunch of stuff where you find out that just corgis were behind the whole thing in the first place. They have like a dog control room where they control all the monsters and stuff. It's amazing.
That's incredible.
It's one of the best endings in any game, but it's like it's a super secret ending that you have to do by doing a whole bunch of weird stuff.
Oh my god.
And then the last one I wanted to mention, and it's actually another one of my favorite all-time games, and this one's a hit or miss one for a lot of people. Sean probably can guess this one too, but Alien Isolation, because Alien is my all-time favorite movie, and when we were talking, because back on my old podcast, we would talk all the time and brainstorm, because my co-host there, Drew McMillan, was also a huge fan of the Alien franchise, so we had like brainstormed like what ideas for what we think could be a really good Alien game, because, you know, obviously running down corridors and doing like a shooter or something like that was like not really true to the franchise in a lot of ways. Like it's more like a haunted house in space versus, you know, just a shoot 'em up game kind of thing.
Right,
so
right.
So we basically brainstormed a bunch of ideas. One we had was like an Alien Telltale game, because you take the controls out of it and the combat out of it and you can just make it spooky. But then the other one we actually had come up with was something like Amnesia: The Dark Descent, but with the alien kind of chasing you and kind of being the monster. And that's what Alien Isolation ended up being. So it was taking cues from my favorite movie of all time, because it's based off the original Aliens aesthetics so much more so than, you know, Aliens or something like that, combining it with like the horror gameplay from Amnesia or Outlast or something like that I love. So I love running around from a monster that's overpowered and will kill you in one hit if it catches you, and kind of having to sneak around, and the different tools you had to basically distract the alien and stuff like that were just so well implemented. It kind of falls off a cliff towards the end though, because they made the game twice as long as it probably should have been, where you think, because it should have ended at a specific point, but it just keeps going, and that's never good for a horror game.
Tail syndrome.
Exactly.
It just keeps going.
Exactly. But in horror games specifically, padding them for content is never a good idea. In fact, usually I think the best horror games are the games you can actually beat in, you know, 6 or 7 hours, I think. Yeah. And almost all the games I listed, except for Alien Isolation, all fit in that bill. So, yeah.
I think that's a fantastic list. And like, I keep hearing about Dead Space. I've actually never played it.
Oh, man.
So like, I'm actually genuinely curious about the reboot and as to how good it's going to be. But the rest of that list is like fantastic. Like that's a really cool list. Like, you know, my co-host Darren is also a massive horror fan. I think you guys would get along like so well. Like, and he like loves Silent Hill and Resident Evil. And for me, like, I think Resident Evil 4 is the earliest horror game I can remember playing.
Yeah.
Like that was kind of, I think, my first horror game. And like that one has a very special place in my heart because of that. And like, I'm genuinely excited, and I really do hope, because the reviews around the VR version are good. And like, again, I'm a glutton for punishment at this point. So it's just kind of like, I hope it comes to PSVR 2, I'm assuming, because I don't think we'll run on PSVR basic. And like, for me, like, I think I'm much more towards like the creepier horror elements than Fallout. Like Danganronpa is one of my favorites because of how fucked up it gets. Yeah. And like, I think there are certain moments in that game where I was just like, oh my God, what the hell? Why? Yeah. And like, just kind of that ever present foreboding feeling in that game.
Then I could say the same thing about another game that I left off my list too, but Doki Literature Club is another game I felt that about, where it's not really a horror game, but in a lot of ways it is. It's just a different type of horror. Yeah. But again, that just feeling of dread you get throughout that game is just really interesting. Danganronpa is another great choice because I love those games too.
So good. What about you, Sean? What are some of your favorite horror games?
Man, when you're talking about the first one I ever played, I'm trying to remember. There was like an old PC game where you were trying to solve a mystery around a school, and it like probably wasn't a horror game, but it scared the bejesus out of me. That's brought up some good old memories there. But The Evil Within is probably my favorite of all time. It's Shinji Mikami, who Resident Evil, yes, yeah, Resident Evil fame.
Also, Goof Troop on the Super Nintendo.
Amazing, amazing. Just what the rage on this guy. This is one of the, and I was actually kind of disappointed in the second one, to be honest with you. The first one is just so like, I didn't want to know what was actually going on. I just love the ride that I was going through with this game. Every time it was like a dream where you open a door and suddenly you're in a completely different space. Like I was in a basement, and then I climb out of the basement. I'm in like a field of sunflowers, and I feel like the camera angle was just perfect. The creepiness factor was throughout. I just never really felt safe in that game. And it, at the time, I don't know if it holds up to this day, but at the time I felt like it looked really, really good, and definitely one of the ones that I really stuck with and didn't really like, even though it did scare me quite a lot, I just felt determined to get to the end of it. So Evil Within is like at the top of my list of like, not even just best horror games. It's one of the best games I've played. right there alongside, I think, with Dead Space. But I want to give a shout out to Slenderman.
Nice, yes.
Just so simple, and just why is that so scary?
Right.
Like, I'm playing on my laptop and, like, broad daylight, and I know what it's trying to do to me. Like, it's so, when I know what the game is like, I'm trying to scare you.
Yeah.
You're going to get scared, and it still works. Like, what the heck?
Right.
Very, very simple. Yeah. Indie game that kind of has taken off, I think, into a number of different ways. So Slenderman jumps out to me. What is it? Condemned or Criminal Origins or Criminal Intent?
Criminal Origins.
Criminal Origins. Yeah. What a terrifying game. This is a Sega game, I think, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
What an absolutely terrifying game, especially if you have like a decent sound system, which probably could be said about any of these games, but this is the one that really jumped out to me. I didn't want to finish that one. Actually,
Really?
It was so scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never heard of it. What is it?
It was a 360 launch title, and you basically play a police investigator who ends up actually getting framed for murder. And he basically has to, prove his innocence. And you actually, what was cool about it was not only was there some great combat with, dudes with metal clubs, but you also had to do like a lot of investigative work because you're a police officer. So you had to do a bunch of forensic and stuff like that, which was really cool.
Yeah, you have like a fluorescent light detector or black light detector. You have your camera and you search around the crime scene. Like, it actually in many ways kind of reminded me of Seven, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, just the creepiness of criminals, and like you get snuck up on you, and you'd hear people kind of chasing you. You go, I better get out of here, and then they come up to you and they get really in your face. So yeah, very, very scary game for the 360, and same on the 360 was Fear.
Okay.
I don't know what the acronym stands
First
for.
Encounter Assault Recon.
What a
that memory, Ryan. Wow.
He didn't need to. I could have looked it up on my laptop here, but
I've actually beaten Fear like 10
Ryan's
times.
fast.
Nice.
I love that game.
That game is awesome. Very terrifying. One of the most memorable weapons, the Penetrator, of course.
Yeah.
Which is basically like a giant nail gun that you can like pin people up on the wall.
Yeah.
And it has the little girl, like basically from The Ring, just a 9-year-old with long black hair in front of her face who will terrify you in your dreams or in real life. You don't know.
And it was also like a really revolutionary game at the time
Big time.
for AI in particular,
Yep.
because of the way the enemies were kind of set up, because it was one of the best breakthroughs in games we'd kind of seen for AI, where the enemies were super smart.
Yeah.
Like they
Wow.
predicted your movements and they were kind of watching while you're playing it, because the idea is you're basically fighting off against a psychic who's actually controlling all of the soldiers. So as the soldiers die, he learns your moves and is able to predict you more as you go through the experience. And they actually did that a lot better in the sequels as well, like Fear 2 and Fear 3 as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of the things that was really cool about it. So it had this awesome blend of like really cool like first-person shooter elements that again learned as it went, combined with the horror elements from like The Ring or something like that, or The Grudge or something.
Yeah, yep,
It's
totally.
really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
very much like Half-Life on that AI front, because that was one thing that people will remember if you're there in like 1997, 1998 playing a Half-Life. Like AI was the thing everybody was talking about, and how the soldiers would they would try to snuff you out if you couldn't just hide. Like they would figure it out and they'd flank you in a way that wasn't really done at that time, and then kind of take it to the next level.
You had to really vary your movements throughout. That game. And it was interesting.
Tough.
Yeah, and it's cool looking back on it, because like that's Monolith who actually does all the like Middle Earth Shadow of Mordor games.
Yeah,
but they went to go on to revolutionize AI again with the Nemesis system.
That's right.
Years later.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah, same developer.
That's amazing.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I think for me, like when I think of horror games outside of like pretty much Danganronpa, Doki Doki, and pretty much Resident Evil 4, I don't think I've ever played them alone. Like for me, like whenever I jump into a horror game, it's like a very like I'm with a couple buddies and we're sitting down. Like Until Dawn, we played that way, where we each took a couple characters and we like passed around the controllers depending on which character was on screen. So that's another fantastic shout out.
PT has got to be mentioned.
Yes,
like
yes,
that is one that you're right. And I don't think I played PT by myself. And I still, again, I knew that there was going to be a jump scare.
Right?
I know it's coming, and I still that probably should have been the first game I mentioned, because I don't think any game has made me throw my controller. Like I was so scared it just like my controller jumped out of my hand somehow.
So creepy.
Yeah.
It's so creepy. And like Amnesia's the same way, and same with Slenderman actually.
Yeah.
Like when we were in university, we'd all like huddle into the dark basement into my room, and like we'd pop the laptop open and we'd take turns playing it. And like I'll never forget when we were playing Slenderman, one of my roommates literally like dove off his chair.
Seriously.
Like he got so startled just up front in his face. He literally like dove off the chair and like cowered beside the table for a second, because it like shocked him to his system.
Yeah,
and so for me, like I always love playing horror games like that, just because like I think also it takes away some of the scariness for me, just because like I'm with other people.
Yeah.
But if a game succeeds in creeping you out, even despite that, like kudos. And I think for me, one that really needs to be shouted out for a horror game that wasn't a horror game, because, and I'll preface this by saying I knew nothing about this game going into it. Like, all I ever heard was play this game without doing any research, and that was Gone Home.
Oh,
So I
nice.
went into that with, again, a couple friends, and we were all like, oh my God, we keep hearing about this game. Everybody says not to look anything up. So we didn't. So we kept waiting
Yeah.
for things to get scary. We kept waiting for things to like, and I think just by our own expectations, that scared us more than what the game was actually doing, but just like the
It's
atmosphere
like
in that
completely
game.
the opposite.
Right? Yeah, I know. And it's completely opposite. It ends up being like an incredibly heartwarming tale. And
Yeah.
it's like there's so much love that was put into that game. But like going into it expecting it as a horror game, it still totally works until
Yeah.
you realize what's actually going on.
Yeah,
But,
because
like,
you go into the creepy house and you're like, oh, what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
You hear the thunder going off in the background and stuff, and yeah. Also, more shout outs, Matt, because of course I'm an old man. I've played old games. Got to shout out to some of the earliest horror games,
shout him out.
like Halloween on the Atari 2600, where you're
God.
running around, you're Laurie Strode, and you're basically trying to kind of rescue these kids. And then as soon as you hear the do 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 do, yeah, the Michael Myers theme comes in, and then Michael Myers runs up to you and is like trying to stab you. Oh man, great game.
Oh my
Also,
God.
Friday the 13th on the NES. I mean, you're going around Camp Crystal Lake. You're also again trying to save children who are in cabins, but also trying to keep all of your like camp counselors alive. Because if Jason kills them, there's permadeath, so you lose them forever.
No way.
Or Nightmare on Elm Street on NES as well, which is also a solid jam as well. You go into a bunch of haunted houses. You're collecting Freddy's bones because it takes place between Nightmare 3 and Nightmare 4 essentially, and you basically are trying to assemble his bones so you can destroy them, so you can kill Freddy forever. So those are the old games I wanted to give a shout out to as well.
I
Go ahead,
thought
Sean.
you were gonna say BioShock when you were talking about a game that wasn't really a horror game, but like kind of creeped you out. Like that game, especially like what are they? Freakers? What the heck are they called?
No, they're splicers.
Splicers. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that game really creeped me out. I was playing that by myself in the basement.
That game's basically a survival horror game, just not a horror game.
Yeah,
In a lot of ways, because you're really scrounging for resources in that game.
yeah,
You have to really be mindful of some of the stuff you're using, especially if you're going to take on any of the big daddies too, which of course are big menacing creatures that will kill you very easily if you're not
Yeah.
careful. So yeah, in a lot of ways, it has a lot of horror tones and it has a lot more in common than a game like Resident Evil 2
Right.
versus a game like Doom or something
Yeah.
like that.
I think Resident Evil 4 was like the first pure horror game I
yeah.
played. But I think the one that I want to shout out very quickly that literally like scared the crap out of me when I was a kid was the original Spider-Man on PS1 actually.
what?
Well, yeah, I know. When Venom showed up and when Carnage showed up and then like
Oh,
there was those
nice.
chase sequences, I remember sitting there being like, oh my God. I was like
Mm,
8 or 9 at the time. And I just remember being
I
terrified.
love it.
That was the kind of one of the first fundamental experiences for me that like really creeped me out. So to kind of keep on this train of games that we would like to see become horror games, is where I want to go next. So I'm going to ask you guys, like, give me a game that is by no means a horror game, like by no stretch of the imagination. But I want to know which game would you want to see from like what genre or from what franchise get turned into a horror game, and kind of where would you want to see that? So like, for example, I'll throw the first one out. I want to see a really fucked up dark Pokemon game.
Nice.
I
That's a
wanna
great idea.
I just think that like, especially with some of those ROM hacks that are out there, like Pokemon Uranium, like there are a lot of chances in that universe for things to get really fucked up and really weird. And like I would like to see, people do Nuzlocke runs where they have permadeath on the Pokemon and stuff too, but like kind of go in that direction, have a really creepy, weird story. Like you see elements of it in Pokemon Red with like the Silph Tower. Like I want to see them get really like mangled, really fucked up. I want to see some like really weird and messed up story, especially because with the Pokemon, especially Pokemon that control time and space, like you can get into some really dark, weird, spooky shit. And for me, like I'd love to see Pokemon as just like a straight up horror game. And like it's funny because I mean, with Arceus coming out, there's the first time you can actually get attacked by wild Pokemon and get like clobbered as you're kind of running around, and you can actually black out from just Pokemon attacking you. I would really love to see just a really messed up, dark
That
horror-esque
is such a
Pokemon
good
game.
idea.
Because I think one would be just a really funny turn, and I mean, Lord knows it's never going to happen. But like, I just want to see some dark themes. I want to see some seriousness within the story. I want to see some really weird consequences and like situations where you're just like on the run, where you just have to get away from Pokemon who are coming after you. I think like it's so out there, but I think it would be a lot of fun to actually dive into. Ryan, what about you? What's a franchise that you would want to see get turned into a horror game, or like a game that isn't a horror game get turned into one?
So one that came to mind, and this isn't going to make my answer because it technically did have a horror game before, which was Doom. That was one I was like I would love to see a Doom horror game, because Doom is all about fighting demons, but you feel so overpowered that it doesn't feel like it's a horror game.
Right.
So maybe like more of a survival horror-ish game. But then that's what Doom 3 essentially was. So I can't really pick that. But I'm gonna go in the other direction with id and say I want a Quake survival horror game, because especially if you go back and play the first Quake versus the other Quake games that came after it, it's because the other Quake games are all about fighting the Strogg, which are like this race of like cyborg aliens from space that are basically harvesting humans to make more Strogg, essentially. But that's you can't really do like a lot of good horror tones with that. But the very first Quake is all about fighting, just occultish monsters and kind of weird stuff, like spider monsters and stuff like that. Like you could bring a lot of horror tones in. If you kind of framed it in the styling of maybe Quake 1, where you're going to all these like spooky castles that have a bunch of like ghosts and other enemies in there, a lot of like scary monsters, and kind of chasing you around. So maybe like a survival horror first-person shooter game based off Quake, I think would be really awesome.
Oh, I think that universe is like ripe for the taking in that kind of direction too. Because I mean, like, when was the last time we saw like a proper Quake?
Yeah, it's been a long time. We had Quake Champions,
right,
which was like a multiplayer like Overwatch style game, but then they haven't done a Quake since Quake 4, which was at the launch of the Xbox 360.
There you go. So come on, bring Quake back. Give it some horror elements.
This is something Sean and I have been saying for a while, because I know Sean also is a big fan of Quake as well.
Love me some Quake, especially Quake 2. That's where my love really lies for it. But yeah, I think that would be great to. I want them to do for Quake what they've done with Doom, and for Wolfenstein, it's like it's next in line. So, yeah.
What about you, Sean? What's a game that you want to see made into more horror?
We're gonna go Twisted. Ryan was kind of like, Quake is already kind of spooky already. Like that's just taking it up a notch on the horror. But we're gonna go Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing is going to be Animal Crossing will be the way that this game is going to work. It's going to be the most terrifying game you ever played. So you're on the island with all your villager friends. Everybody's having a great time, and then Tom Nook shows up and says, "I want to play a game." And he's
Nice.
Jigsaw. He's basically Jigsaw, and he puts you into situations with all of your villager friends, and you get to determine get to find out who actually wants to live and who will be destroyed by the gore machine that is the Saw games. That's what we're doing. Have you ever seen? There's some great kind of like illustrations and fan art of Tom Nook with like bloodshot eyes and a knife and everything. Like he's got a black heart. That Tom Nook.
He does.
He
does.
He's a capitalist at heart, but I do think that just one too many stressful days can push him over the edge, and I think he would put all the villagers in this situation. So yeah.
Listen, he has like a lot of money that he just lends to you.
Yes.
And I feel like there's a really dark source of where he gets that money.
Mm-hmm.
And like some animals leave to go to another island and you never see them again.
That's
like,
right.
I think there's a good call there. So what I want to ask then is how do you see the time coming into that element, right? Animal Crossing has like, a day-by-day calendar. How do you see the time coming into play? Because I feel like if you leave the island for 6 months and you come back and you're like half of your villagers are gone and like one is like missing an arm, where do you see?
That's a great question, because it loops right into the Saw mechanic. Anybody who's seen the Saw movies with Jigsaw, like there's a timer, and at the end of the timer, then like whatever, like the ball will drop, or you'll be dropped into some sort of like boiling water, or something terrible will happen to you at the end of this thing. So it will really challenge you, because the timer it'll give you a long time, but it will take you a long time to get out of these terrible situations.
Right.
So if you decide that, I've got to like go off to work or school, or I've got other things to do, well, guess what? Your character's dead, and all of your friends are dead. Everybody's dead, and you'll have to, I guess, start over. I don't know. Like it's all real time. So, and it will take you a long time to get out of these.
So
these
then when you die, can we have like the death screen that happens in Friday the 13th on the NES, where it says, "You are dead. Your friends are dead. Everyone you know is dead. Game over."
That's right. Yeah.
Perfect. And that like recycles itself so well to start like new islands, because you start off with new animals every time, right? It's just like it's a different experience, different personalities.
So real talk, Sean, will it be better than the Saw video games that came out on Xbox 360?
I hope
Same games were
so.
not good.
Saw and Lost, not very good licensed games on the
Lost
360.
via Domos. Oh, that was a game.
Not very good. I want to see like one of the villagers is actually like somehow been given some sort of like serum, like was it toxic or whatever in Batman, and they just get like really monstrous and veiny and everything, and they may be one of the things you've got to, I don't know, defeat.
They could come through one of the walls in your house, and you have to collect resources to rebuild the wall in your
telling
house.
you, yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
Really, if you think about it, Animal Crossing is a horror game already. Like just disguised as light and fluffy and lovely and design and everything, but it's like you owe a mortgage and Tom Nook is going to come after you if you don't get that mortgage taken care of. So you sign your life away, basically.
That's a good point. And like, I'm so curious to see how that would come together. It just, think about it. Like, also you could start crafting. Crafting is a massive part of that game, right? You're going to need to actually make medicine and bandages and stuff. I think that game would be a fucking mess in the best way possible.
I think if you just, before you get to your island, if you like just the cutscene just before that happens is your villager signing a deal with the devil, and then you go off on your, like, you could have, it changes the entire outlook of the game. So yeah, let's twist that upside down.
Oh my god, I love it. I think all three of these would make for fantastic non-horror games that we can kind of swing into horror. I think that'll be a lot of fun. But let's mosey over on to some news, which I'm just pulling up on my phone. Here we go. We're going to be talking about a couple different news stories. I'm going to be pulling from IGN. The first one of the big talks of this week, Grand Theft Auto: The Trilogy, the definitive edition, gets gameplay trailer and a November release date. This is written by Joe Screbbles. Rockstar has announced that Grand Theft Auto: The Trilogy, the definitive edition, will be released digitally on November 11th, with the physical releases to follow on December 7th. The news comes alongside a first look at the updated versions of the classic 3 games. The trilogy costs $59.99 USD. And what was it? San Andreas is going to be coming to Game Pass day 1, and then GTA 3 is going to be coming to PS Now in December. So we talked about this a little bit a few weeks ago with Khalif, and he very much said, don't play these games.
Wow.
Yeah, well, to be fair, we hadn't seen anything at that point. Now we actually have some trailers. We actually know that what they're doing to it. They're adding GTA 5 style controls to a lot of it. So like, I kind of wanted to touch base on what your opinions are on the GTA trilogy, because for me, I only ever played Vice City at my cousin's house, like very sporadically, and same thing with San Andreas. I played a little bit at my buddy's house. So like, these 3 games were ones that I've never really dove into too much. Where's the hype check on the GTA trilogy on this coming in November and then physical in December? Ryan, where are you at with this?
So as someone who actually played these games last year to prepare for a podcast that we do over on the Xbox Drive called The Crossroads, where we talk about the 50 best games on the original Xbox, I can tell you that I kind of agree with Khalif a bit in the sense that I do think that they were good games at the time, but they are much harder to go back to design-wise, especially with the mission design in a lot of the games in particular. And I pointed out to Sean before, and I think to you as well, like the toy helicopter mission in Vice City might be one of the worst design missions in any video game I've ever played, where it's just, the controls are terrible, it doesn't play well. So I mean, with the new shooting controls, I think it will being a little bit closer to Grand Theft Auto 5, as they kind of talked about in kind of the press release. I think that these might play better. So I think that there's a possibility that they might be fun to go back to. But I think some of the missions, if they didn't change the mission design of them, are going to be very frustrating, especially if you don't like escort missions. Because guess what you do a lot in these old games? A lot of escort missions. Where escorting other cars or people on the street, and it can be very annoying if you don't like escort missions like I do. So I do think that they are not perfect games. They were more time and place games, where I think that mission design was totally fine in the era they came out in, but now games have kind of evolved very quickly past what these games had set out to do. And not only that, but I think a lot of people, what they really liked about these games back when they played them wasn't really, playing the story missions. It was, the freedom of going around and blowing stuff up and just doing whatever you want. And that you can probably still have fun with. So if that's your thing, I think you'll probably be totally fine with these. But $70, $79 Canadian, it's a lot to ask for these.
Yep.
So the nice thing is, at least the 3 of us in this room have Xbox Game Pass, so we will be able to try out San Andreas, and then from that point we can make the decision of whether or not it's probably enough to purchase these. Right. So we do have that option available to us. If you don't have Xbox Game Pass, let's say you're on PlayStation, you still have the PlayStation Now version if you want to subscribe to Now for a month to try out GTA 3. So it's not like you have it without options. I just would have loved if there was a demo or something like that to maybe show this off, especially. But I think because I do think people that have only played Grand Theft Auto 5 before but never played these games, I think they'll have a tough time going back to them again unless they're going to just run around and randomly blow stuff up.
Yeah, I remember always just trying to rack up 5 stars and like live as long as possible. That's pretty much the definitive
And if you like that, then I think you're going to be totally fine.
Yeah,
it's just if you want to experience the story or go through the missions, it's just like, it's a slog.
I don't know if I want to pay $90 Canadian after tax for just running around and blowing shit up. But Sean, where are you at with this? You were audibly exasperated kind of when we were talking about playing these games. Where are you at with this? Where's your hype check?
I think number one, the timing is completely wrong. To have this price of a game this old of a game in the holiday season. It's not for me. Maybe it is perfectly placed for, like, I mean, Grand Theft Auto is a gigantic game that I can't even begin to comprehend its popularity. So maybe for a lot of people this is actually perfect, but for me it's like, thank God it's coming to Game Pass. Thank God that there's an option on PlayStation now. So because that's exactly how I will be playing it, and I'm curious because I don't have the recency that Ryan does with playing this game. There's a lot of games and a lot of times where, especially as we get a little bit older, we're like, back in my day, games were simpler, things were simpler, and things were a little bit easier, and things were just about the game. They didn't get too, up their own ass, I guess. And I have a feeling that that's the case with the Grand Theft Auto games, where it's just gameplay. And so I'm curious to see if that is truly the case here, and how they actually do the remake, and then also just the social commentary. I'm curious on how that kind of lives up in this time. Ryan and I have talked about this on the Xbox Drive, and I just feel like games that were made, gosh, when did those games even come out? They were probably
like
15 years
early
ago.
2000s.
Yeah. So I just feel like it was a different time in terms of what you could say, and I'm very curious to see how that stands up. So I'm looking forward to the humor, to be honest.
Well,
with
we do
you.
know they've made some changes. For example, someone spotted online in one of the trailers that there was a Confederate flag that was normally in the game before that's been censored out.
Oh, interesting.
So I know that they've made some changes to this.
Yeah.
As far as some of the content. So to your point, maybe they've changed some of the content in the game to kind of reflect that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not like this is a sensitive kind of thing to talk about because it's not like I'm calling for like hate speech or anything like that. But I have always enjoyed that Rockstar felt like they didn't answer to anybody. Like very similar to like I like South Park because everybody gets made fun of, kind of like that nobody is safe, and I always kind of like look forward to that, and I feel like that's probably not going to be the case in the future with GTA games, and this is sort of like a testing bed to see what can we expect perhaps from GTA 6. Like, will they start to pull back, or will they just double down on how insane things are just in general? So
yeah, and I'm really curious, Ryan, because I think you made a good point, because I feel like there's a lot of people who got in on GTA with the last decade of GTA 5 and GTA Online. And like, I'm curious to see how people go back to those games, because again, like for me, I don't know if I'm going to dive back in just to run around and screw around. I feel like there's so many games that you can do that in now that unless I'm going for a nostalgia trip, I don't really think I'm going to.
Well, especially GTA 5 in particular is already right there waiting for you.
Exactly, right? And it's like you can get it on sale with like $1 million shark dollars or whatever the hell it is. So like pretty often. So like, I'm curious to see how well this is going to do, just because, well, it's GTA, it's going to do fine. But just I think the social commentary, Sean, is also a good point, because I'm just curious to people who just dove in the last couple of years, how are they going to feel going back to it?
Right.
Because for me, I have a hard time going back to games where, especially if luckily they updated the controls, I would have been having a lot of trouble going back to that.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to see how this is going to do. But it's just around the corner, so get stoked. And unless you want physical, then you're a little bit.
So is it day and date for Vice City on Game Pass, and then later for?
No, so it's San Andreas only.
Oh, I'm sorry, I mixed them up. But that is day and date.
Yeah, it's day and date.
And not day and date for PlayStation?
It's a month later.
Oh, wow. They just really don't want to do that ever.
Well, no, it's because of PlayStation now only updates games once per month at a specific day. So they so they don't update games throughout the month like Game Pass does. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's like that, because the day they announced is when it will come to PlayStation now, when all the other games are updated.
Got it. Okay.
That's just how they do it over there.
Yeah, I'm very curious. And like, also just kind of weird how they are each getting one different game. But I mean, I guess that's a reason to jump on.
The worst part is the best game of the three is Vice City, I think, because I think it's the most balanced game. Because San Andreas, I think, was a great game for the time, but it had like a lot of simulation elements in it. Like, for example, if your character eats too much or eats too little, it'll affect your stats and stuff, which sucks to go back and play a game like that. And there's a bunch of systems in there you have to play around with, like you have to exercise and stuff, which is, I don't know about you guys, but I think that's kind of annoying in a game to go do that stuff, because I do that stuff in real life. I don't want to do that in a video game. So whereas Vice City, you don't have to worry about that, but it made a lot more strides over the first Grand Theft Auto 3 to kind of put it kind of in a good middle seat, and that's the one that's missing from here. Plus, it takes place in the 80s, and the 80s are awesome, except for Sean, who doesn't love neon. Because neon should be everywhere.
I feel like that's a very calculated decision as to why Vice City is not showing up on either one of these services. That's your reason to buy in, right? Because I feel like that's a lot of people's. I don't know if it's their favorite, but that's one that they remember fondly.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll see. We're just around the corner. Our second news story, once again coming from IGN and once again coming from Joe Scrabbles, Advance Wars 1+2 reboot camp has been delayed to 2022. Advance Wars Reboot Camp has been delayed because the game needs a little more time for fine-tuning. Originally scheduled for December 3rd on Nintendo Switch, the delay pushes the game to an unspecified date in spring 2022. Ryan, I swear to fucking God, if this game comes out in February, I am going to lose my goddamn mind.
I'd be so excited. Another game to add to the spreadsheet. I'm
Jesus
so excited
Christ.
for more games in February 2022. But no, seriously, honestly, I just want them to take the time with this one.
Yeah.
I mean, December, I think, was a good month for it because there wasn't anything else coming out besides Halo. But to be honest, I think there's a completely different audience for this game versus Halo, so I think it would have been fine. So, honestly, I'm just excited to play it again because I've really missed Advance Wars. I think it's a great franchise. It's one that I think a lot of people missed on the GBA and on the DS. So, I'm excited that we're getting a new one, even though it is just a remake of the first two games. But I think it's going to be fun when it eventually does come up. But yeah, you're right. Please don't make it February. Please make it literally, well, March. I was just going to say make it every other month, but March is also getting kind of full right now too. Right. So, April, maybe?
Yeah. I'm fine with the delay itself. Like I said, like I think you're right in that like this was I think a really perfect time for it. I'm excited to jump back in because I remember those games very fondly from back in the day. But take your time with it and just please don't come out in the first 3 months. But I have a feeling that next year is going to be an endless onslaught from the amount of games that didn't come out this past year because of the world's situation. Sean, what about you? Are you a big Advance Wars guy? Does this game do anything for you?
No, but I am excited for people like Ryan, and I feel like it's more about just what this symbolizes in terms of them not abandoning this franchise. So that I think that is softening the blow of the delay. It's like it's okay. Like we just kind of found out about it at E3. So it's delays are. I'll never get upset about a delay, whether I'm excited about the game or not. Like just make the game great, and hopefully it doesn't land in February. So yeah, and maybe it'll be enough time for me to actually understand why I should be excited about the game. So there could be a benefit on that front too.
Yeah, I just want to see a world where we get a new chapter of this game, and I'd like to see them go in like the Fire Emblem Three Houses style. Like I feel like there's a lot of world to open up around Advance Wars, and I hope we get that, and I hope this game sells well because that's a very classic. It's fantastic.
It'll just depend on who's actually going to be making it with this one, especially because Intelligent Systems did the first two, and Intelligent Systems does the Fire Emblem series. They're obviously probably working on the next Fire Emblem game at this point, so I would imagine they're not going to be doing Advance Wars. So I wonder who Nintendo would be doing, because Way Forward's actually doing this port. And I wonder if maybe they would even contract Way Forward to do the next one, because Way Forward does a whole bunch of other stuff too.
Yeah, I'm excited. And like again, take your time with it. We'll play it when it's ready. Our very last news story that we're going to touch on comes once again from IGN, written by Jared Moore. Haunted Chocolatier is not the only game the Stardew Valley creator is working on. Stardew Valley creator Eric Barone, aka Concerned Ape, recently revealed that his next game will be Haunted Chocolatier, a top-down pixel-based sim that bears a strong resemblance to his previous work. While the developer has shown off gameplay footage of Haunted Chocolatier on YouTube and shared details about what fans can expect from it, he's also said he's working on a whole bunch of other stuff. So if anybody missed this announcement, it is our first new game from Concerned Ape after Stardew Valley was a massive, unbelievable success. Graphically, this looks very similar, but basically you are almost in like Moonlighter-esque fashion. You are running a chocolate shop, and you have to run around, collect resources to make new chocolate, and then you go out and you can sell it to different ghosts and stuff. It looks adorable. It looks like it's going to be really, really cool. I always appreciated Stardew Valley. I've tried to get into it more than a few times, but I think this kind of chocolatey, haunted-esque nation of it, idea of this new game gets me kind of excited, Sean. What about you? Were you ever big into Stardew Valley? Does Haunted Chocolatier do anything for you?
Stardew Valley has been a topic of conversation this weekend because we hung out with a couple friends who were... as we came to know, they were cosplaying as some characters from Stardew Valley, and it's one that I think similar to you, Matt. Like I've wanted to play it many times. I've started a farm a couple times on a variety of systems, on PC twice and on Switch, and I still could be playing it on my way back home. This was a story. Wasn't this on? This was on one of either the books or something. I feel like I got right into this guy's story about building the game and how it just kept going on and on and on. And
Blood, Sweat, and Pixels.
Yeah, it wasn't the book.
book.
Yeah. And I'm very curious if like the timing of this announcement. Like I don't know if they gave a sense of how far away this is, or if they've learned anything from it. I don't know if he's just gonna be working on this game for the next 10 years. And if he is, that's fine. I just hope that the journey is good for him on this game as well, because lots of lessons to be learned from Stardew.
Especially because he already said that this isn't the only thing that he's working on.
Right, well, so maybe not, yeah.
Yeah, he started this apparently just like over the course of the last year and a half. Yeah. So this is again, going back to that book, he was already talking about a couple of projects in that book where I think one of them was about like catching bugs that he was very excited about. Yeah. So he obviously has a lot on the go, and I just hope this isn't another like Undertale Deltarune situation where we just get like little pieces of something until we get to the next one. Again, similarly, I just want him to take his time.
It does feel similar to that, doesn't it? Though, like where he probably doesn't have to work another day in his life. He's probably good. He does, and that's kind of why I'd say like hopefully it's a good journey for him because like it doesn't have to go under the gun. He doesn't probably have to do it by himself anymore either. Like and probably hire a team and start up a whole thing. But yeah, I'm very curious. Any sophomore effort is very, very interesting. After like a big kind of explosion, what comes afterwards is. Yeah. I hope everybody just looks at that very fairly and not like, how do you compare to Stardew? Such a monumental game, such a hallmark, and people love it, and the community around it has been so amazing, and even the multiplayer that he added years later, like the project has been ongoing. So I hope it turns out good. I'll just kind of wait on it, to be honest. Yeah.
I get it. Ryan, what about you? What are you excited to make about some haunted chocolate?
I got literally nothing to say about this. Honestly, no, I tried Stardew Valley, but I'm not really the type of person who loves these types of games. So for me, I've got nothing. Especially like Animal Crossing and Harvest Moon and stuff like that. Like a lot of the like simulator games, especially if there's farming involved, just not for me. So I don't know if switching the setting to a chocolate factory really does anything for me, especially because I'm imagining there's going to be similar style gameplay to it. So for me, this is definitely probably not on my list.
Totally fair. Yeah, I get you. Well, everyone, that brings us to the end of Burnout Brighter podcast number 112. Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Ryan, for joining me on this magical endeavor. And I'm so stoked we got to do a podcast in person for the first time in Lord knows how long.
It's great that we did it this way, because then afterwards, if we were to come back, it would be virtual, but not the other way around. Why not just dive right in? Come on into our hotel room. I'll sit on my bed. You can see all the things that we've been drinking.
I appreciate
oddly lots of McDonald's in here.
Yeah,
oddly, so strange.
Very weird. Yeah, it's not just a bit.
Yeah, seriously. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining. But before we go, Ryan, I'm going to go to you first. Hit me with some plugs. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. That's TURFORD, because everybody always asks. You can also find us on Twitter at YouMeCapris, where we basically tweet about all our shows there. We have links for all the shows every single week as they kind of publish. So you can check us out there because we actually post shows every single day for the most part, except for a couple days. But for the most part, we have a new show pretty much every single day over there. We're also on podcast feeds around the globe, so you can search for the Xbox Drive, the PlayStation Drive, the RPG Cave, the Nintendo Drive, We the Gamercast. We're on all the things, as well as at Patreon. If you want to be a Patreon supporter, listen to some exclusive shows over there as well, or early access to some of our shows. Patreon.com/YouMeCapris, how you do that. So come join our amazing community. Also, we have a Discord, which is free to join. You can actually... I don't know if you'll have a link to it in the show notes.
I will.
You will. So you can it's free to join. So you can join up and hang out with our awesome community. Matt's vouched for them.
Yeah.
We're awesome. So come out and say hello.
Yeah, please do. Sean, what about you? Where can people find you?
Everything that Ryan just said.
Right.
Also Twitter at Sean Capri. Of course, Sean like Connery, Capri like the pants.
Perfect. And if you have any questions for these guys, make sure you go over onto the Twitter or the Discord, because they ask for a lot of questions posted every week. Specifically, if you want to come talk about PlayStation with me and Ryan, every Wednesday we have a PlayStation tweet, or on the Discord or on YouTube videos, come drop a question and we will answer it to the best of our ability. Sean, Ryan, thank you so much again for joining me. This has been an absolute pleasure and a long time in the works, so I'm very excited we got to do this. We will see you next week. Peace out, everyone.
Do 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 do.